cold emptiness of space stretched in all directions, silent and endless. A place where ships vanished without a trace and stories ended before they could begin. In that darkness, a small alien vessel glided, its scanners searching for minerals. Among the drifting rocks of an asteroid belt, the crew was tired from long shifts, their days blending into one another. Nothing exciting ever happened out here, or so they thought. One of the crew, a young navigator named Kale, leaned back in his chair. His eyes wandered across the blinking lights on his console. The ship hummed softly, and outside the windows only the glittering specks of distant stars could be seen. Kale yawned, ready for another night of boredom. But then, a faint signal cut through the silence. It was weak, almost broken, as if fading. Away with every second, Kale sat up quickly. "Captain, I've picked up something," he said. His voice was sharp, filled with surprise. The captain, an older alien named Tharek, frowned and stepped closer. He looked at the readings. At first, it seemed impossible. A life signal, small, flickering but real, was drifting out there in the void. Could it be a trap? One of the engineers asked nervously. Pirates sometimes used fake signals to lure ships into ambushes. But Tharek shook his head. "No, this is different. The signal is too weak, too genuine. Someone is dying out there." The crew grew silent. Each of them knew the risk of leaving someone behind in space. No one lasted long once their ship was destroyed or their life support failed. Yet here was a being, still alive, refusing to surrender to the darkness. The captain gave the order. "Bring us closer, prepare the medbay." Engines roared softly, guiding the ship toward the source. Minutes passed like hours until finally, through the observation window, they saw it. A small escape pod, scarred with burn marks, tumbling. Slowly in the blackness inside the pod, the figure of a human floated weakly, his face pale, his body limp. His eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, then shut again. He looked broken, fragile, barely clinging to life. Kale whispered softly, almost in awe. "It's a human." The aliens all exchanged glances. Humans were not common in this part of the galaxy. They were known for their strength, their fire, and their stubborn spirit. Yet here was one, helpless and dying. Tharek didn't hesitate. "Bring him aboard now." The crew worked quickly, pulling the pod inside and cutting it open. The medics rushed forward, placing the human on a stretcher. His breathing was shallow, his pulse faint. The medics attached strange devices, humming softly as they pushed. Life back into his body, Kale stood nearby, watching for a moment. He wondered why they were risking their time and safety for this one fragile being. But as he looked closer, he saw something in the human's face. Even as unconscious as he was, something unyielding, something that refused to let go. Hours later, the human stirred. His eyes opened slowly, squinting against the soft lights of the medbay. He coughed weakly, his lips moving. A soft voice escaped. "Water." A medic rushed to bring it, helping him sip. His eyes darted around, confused, then focused on Tharek, who stood at the foot of his bed. "You're safe now," the captain said gently, though the human might not understand his language fully. But somehow the human seemed to know. His eyes softened, a small spark of relief flickering across his tired face. He whispered his name with effort. "Daniel Price." Before drifting back into unconsciousness, the aliens stood in silence. For them, this was just one life among countless others. And yet they felt the weight of what they had done. They had saved someone who had no reason to expect kindness from strangers so far from home. Kale couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was important, like a thread being pulled in the vast fabric of the universe. He didn't know how, but deep inside, he felt that saving Daniel Price would echo far beyond their little ship. This one act of mercy might shape the destiny of entire worlds, and so the alien ship continued its journey, carrying with it not just minerals and supplies, but a fragile, human soul who had been rescued from the jaws of death. None of them could imagine what this would mean in the years to come. None of them could foresee that this one small act would bring back a fleet of human warships one day, changing the fate of their people forever. Back on Earth, the news of Daniel Price's survival spread like fire through the fleets and colonies. Few expected to ever see him alive again after his ship vanished during a border patrol. Yet here he was, thin, scarred but breathing, and the story of how he survived carried even more weight than his return. He told them of the alien ship, the crew that had found him drifting in a broken pod, and how they had chosen compassion instead of turning away. At first, the story sounded simple. A single rescue, a single life saved. But to humanity, it was more than that. Humans carried a deep sense of loyalty, a bond that stretched beyond the stars. One of their own had been saved, not by luck, but by choice. And choices had meaning. The media swarmed around Daniel when he was strong enough to speak. He sat before cameras, his uniform hanging loosely on his shoulders. His voice was rough but steady. They could have ignored me, left me out there to die, but they didn't. They saved me. They saved a human life when they had nothing to gain. His words echoed across stations, beamed to every colony and ship. Children in Earth schools listened with wide eyes. Soldiers on remote outposts replayed his testimony. Families whispered his name over dinner. People who had never seen an alien up close now thought of them differently, not as strangers, but as beings capable of kindness. Still, not everyone agreed. In the halls of the Earth Federation, voices debated fiercely. Some argued that it was a small event, not worth changing policy or strategy. Others insisted that it was proof that alliances could grow from even the smallest seed. Admirals leaned forward during meetings, politicians argued late into the night, and still the question lingered. Should humanity respond? Daniel himself never stopped speaking. Even when his body ached, he stood before soldiers, before young cadets, before the public. His eyes burned with conviction. They saved me, and we cannot forget that. Kindness like theirs cannot go unanswered. He became a living symbol not just of survival but of gratitude. In quiet corners of bars and crowded starports, whispers began. Pilots spoke over drinks. One day we'll return the favor, engineers muttered as they worked on starships. If their world ever falls, we won't forget. The idea took root, slowly at first, but stronger with every telling. Admiral John Carter, a man known for his stern face and unshakable will, read Daniel's report late one night. He closed the file, leaned back in his chair, and stared at the stars outside the window. He remembered the wars humanity had fought, the times they had been abandoned. He knew what it meant when someone chose to save a soldier with no reward. He whispered to himself, "We'll remember. We always remember." The seed of a promise had been planted. Humanity was vast. Its fleet spread across dozens of systems, its colonies growing. But beneath the steel and power there was a heart, and that heart now beat with a quiet vow. If ever those aliens faced danger, humanity would not stand by. Years passed. Daniel healed, but the memory never faded. Whenever he walked the halls of the academy, recruits saluted him not for his rank, but for what he represented. They whispered among themselves that his rescue was not just luck, but destiny. It was a reminder that kindness was never wasted. Across the galaxy, the aliens who had saved Daniel continued their lives, unaware of the growing whispers among humans. They thought of their action as nothing more than a simple choice. They did not know that on Earth, stories of their compassion were shaping the thoughts of admirals and inspiring the dreams of children who would one day fly ships of their own. Daniel often sat by the windows of orbital stations watching Earth spin below. His hand rested against the glass as he thought of that alien captain and the young navigator who had pulled him from the void. He never forgot their faces, even though their languages were different. He told himself over and over, "One day we'll repay this." And though no treaty was signed and no message was sent, the bond was real. It was quiet, invisible, and unspoken, but it lived in the hearts of humanity, a promise as strong as steel. The universe was full of threats, wars, and greed. But when humanity remembered a kindness, they remembered with their whole soul. The aliens had saved just one human, but without knowing it, they had gained the loyalty of an entire species. The stars held many secrets, and in the silence between worlds the quiet vow of humanity waited, patient and unbreakable. The alien world lived in peace for many years. Their cities shone with tall crystal towers. Rivers of light flowed through the streets, and children laughed in the gardens under twin suns. They had no great armies, no massive fleets. Their people believed that peace was safer than war. After all, who would attack a world that had nothing worth stealing? But the galaxy was never truly safe. From the cold edges of uncharted space, predators stirred. Warlords who lived only for power turned their gaze upon the peaceful world. They cared nothing for kindness or mercy, only conquest. Their fleets moved like shadows, slipping past patrols, gathering in the dark. The first sign came in the night sky. Bright streaks tore across the atmosphere. Fire rained down as warlord ships entered orbit. Their voices thundered across open channels, demanding obedience. Submit your world and your resources or burn. Panic swept through the cities. Alarms wailed, families ran for the shelters, and the leaders of the alien world gathered in their council chambers. They tried to send messages for help, but their allies were too far, too weak, or too afraid to intervene. No one wanted to stand against the warlords. The alien fleets were small, fragile defense ships built for patrol, not battle. They rose bravely into the sky, trying to meet the invaders, but the warlord armada was merciless. Fire rained down from massive war cruisers, shredding the defenders into pieces of burning wreckage. One by one, the alien ships fell. Their crews sacrificed in vain attempts to slow the tide. On the ground, cities trembled under bombardment. Towers collapsed, bridges shattered, and the once bright streets were drowned in smoke. Families huddled in underground shelters, holding each other tightly, listening to the distant thunder of destruction above. In the council hall, the leaders argued. Some said surrender was the only way to survive. Others screamed that to surrender was to lose everything. But deep down, they all knew the truth. Their world was dying. They had no fleet strong enough, no soldiers powerful enough to resist. The warlords landed their soldiers, armored giants with cruel weapons. They marched through burning streets, dragging captives from their homes. Entire districts were enslaved overnight. The invaders showed no mercy. Children cried as they were torn from their parents. Markets were looted and temples were desecrated. Hope flickered dimly, but it was not gone. In the chaos, one elder remembered the words of a human long ago, the memory of Daniel Price's. Rescue was still carried by their people. A story whispered quietly, a reminder that sometimes even the smallest act of kindness echoed through the stars. "Send the call," the elder said. "Send it to Earth." The technicians worked frantically. Signals were jammed, communication towers were burning, but they managed to push one final message through the static, a desperate plea. It was sent out into the void, across light years of distance, a cry for help that might never be answered. Above the planet, the warlord flagship loomed like a mountain of iron. Its commander, a massive creature with burning eyes, laughed as he watched the destruction below. To him, this was only another victory, another weak world added to his empire. He believed no one would dare challenge him, but far away, the signal did not vanish into silence. Somewhere in the depths of human space, receivers caught the broken words, distorted by interference but still clear enough. "Help us. They are destroying everything. We saved your kind once. Now we beg. Please." The message reached command stations, then the Federation Council. Some argued that it was not their war, not their responsibility. But others remembered. They remembered Daniel Price and the aliens who had chosen to save him when they had nothing to gain. And in the heart of humanity's fleets, admirals stood in silence, listening to the call. Their faces hardened. They knew what must be done. For humans never forgot a kindness. Back on the alien world, the people hid in their shelters, praying for a miracle. Outside, the warlord armies tightened their grip. The skies burned red and the rivers ran dark. Hope seemed gone, yet in the silence of space, something was already moving. The echo of their mercy years ago was about to return. The alien leaders sent their call into the dark, never sure if anyone would hear it. They sent it not because they believed rescue would come, but because they could not bear the silence of doing nothing. The signal was broken, scattered by interference and enemy jammers. But somehow, it still traveled, carried like a whisper, across the endless stars on a quiet night inside an Earth Federation command center. The signal appeared. An operator leaned forward, frowning as the weak transmission filled his console. Static roared, words cracked and faded. But the message was clear enough. "Help us. We saved one of yours once. Now we beg. Our world is burning." The operator froze, then rushed to his superior. Within moments, the message spread up the chain all the way to the high command. Admiral John Carter sat in the council chamber, the dim lights reflecting off the polished table before him. He was a man of discipline. His hair gray, his face carved by years of battles. Around him sat generals, admirals, and politicians. All of them listened to the broken voice echoing through the speakers. The room fell silent when it ended. Some of the politicians spoke first. "It is not our war," one said sharply. "We cannot risk our fleets for strangers. We have colonies to protect, our borders to hold." Another added, "If we send forces, we risk provoking the warlords into targeting us." Their words carried weight, their voices full of fear, but the admirals and captains remembered. They remembered Daniel Price, the lone pilot who had been pulled from death by these very aliens. Daniel himself stood at the edge of the chamber, not a young man anymore. His eyes burned with the same fire he had carried since the day he was saved. He stepped forward, his voice steady though his heart raced. "They saved me when they had nothing to gain. They showed mercy when they could have walked away. And now they are asking for help. If we turn away, we are not human anymore." The council grew restless. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others lowered their eyes. Admiral Carter finally stood, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "Mercy was given to us once. It is not in our nature to ignore it. We will answer their call." Arguments erupted, but Carter's words carried the strength of steel. He turned to the officers. "Prepare. The fleet. Gather our warships, call the captains. Humanity will not let this world fall." Across Earth and its colonies, orders flashed like lightning. Massive shipyards roared to life. Battleships were armed. Dreadnoughts powered up their colossal reactors. Carriers readied squadrons of starfighters. Destroyers loaded torpedoes and missiles. Names of ships glowed on the lists: Titan, Horizon, Liberty, Valiant, and many more. In one of the hangars, Captain Laura Green stood at the base of her ship, the Horizon. She watched her crew rush aboard, their faces grim but determined. She knew the risks. She knew that going against warlord fleets meant death for many. But when she thought of the message, of the desperation in those voices, she felt only resolve. "If kindness brought us this far," she whispered to herself, "then honor will carry us the rest of the way." Daniel Price was given a choice. He could remain safe on Earth or return to the stars. He didn't hesitate. He strapped himself back into a fighter's seat, his ship painted with fresh markings. He would not watch from afar, not when his life had been the one they saved. The human fleet gathered at the edge of the Sol system, stretching across space like an iron wall. Thousands of engines lit up, glowing blue and white, preparing to tear across the galaxy. Inside the command ship, Admiral Carter looked at the stars, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "Set the course," he ordered. "We move at dawn." When the fleet jumped into hyperspace, the void itself seemed to shudder. Entire families of soldiers left behind messages for loved ones, unsure if they would return, but none complained, none hesitated. Because all of them knew they were not marching to war for conquest or glory. They were going for something purer, something older than politics. Gratitude, far away, on the alien world under siege, the people huddled in their shelters praying. Some whispered that no help would come. Others clung to faith. The skies above them glowed red with fire as the warlord ships circled like predators. But none of them knew that across the galaxy, a storm was already on its way, a storm forged, not of hatred but of loyalty. Humanity had heard their cry, and humanity was coming. The alien skies burned with fire as the warlord fleet circled above. The invaders had already crushed the last defense ships. their wreckage scattered like broken bones across orbit. The world below trembled, its people hiding in fear, believing no savior would come. The warlord commanders laughed at their victory, confident that nothing could challenge them. But then, the silence of space broke. Far beyond the edge of the system, ripples of light appeared like cracks tearing through the fabric of the stars. The warlord scouts first detected strange energy surges. Their officers dismissed it at first. Just interference, one growled, but soon the ripples grew stronger, brighter until shapes began to emerge. The first human dreadnought tore out of hyperspace, its massive hull casting shadows across the stars. Engines burned bright as steel towers of war followed one after another. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and carriers flooded into the system, their numbers growing with every passing second. The warlord commanders leaned forward in shock as they realized what they were seeing. This was not a small response fleet. This was an armada. On the surface, the aliens hiding in bunkers looked to the sky. At first, they thought it was just more enemy reinforcements, but then their scanners identified the new arrivals. A single word echoed through every shelter, whispered in disbelief: humans. Inside the flagship Titan, Admiral John Carter stood on the bridge, his eyes locked on the planet below. "Deploy the fleet," he commanded. His officers moved without hesitation. Orders raced through communication channels. All ships, battle formation, protect the civilians, strike hard and fast. Captain Laura Green aboard the Horizon gripped the edge of her command chair. Her heart pounded as she looked at the enemy ships already turning toward them. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Arm all weapons. Bring engines to full power. Let's show them what humanity means." The warlord fleets rushed to meet the intruders, confident in their size and brutality. Their ships roared forward, cannons glowing. But the humans did not waver. They advanced in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming, their weapons primed. And then the first shots were fired. A human battleship unleashed a barrage of railgun slugs. Each one streaked across the void like a falling star, tearing through enemy armor. An enemy cruiser exploded in fire, spinning helplessly before breaking apart. The warlords answered with their own fury, beams of plasma and missiles raining toward the human fleet. But human shields flared to life, absorbing the worst of the blows. The Horizon cut through the chaos, its guns spitting fire. Laura's crew worked like one heartbeat, targeting enemy after enemy. A frigate dared to charge her flank. But Laura gave a single order: torpedoes. The ship shuddered as the weapons fired. The frigate vanished in a burst of flame. High above, the carriers opened their bays. Starfighters poured into the fight, swarms of small, fast ships diving at the enemy like hawks. Among them flew Daniel Price, his hands steady on the controls of his fighter. His squadron streaked forward, weaving through enemy fire. "For them," he whispered, "for the ones who saved me." His fighter's cannons lit up, cutting down invader after invader, on the ground. People poured out of shelters, staring in awe at the sky. They saw the streaks of battle, the explosions like burning stars. For the first time since the invasion began, they felt something they thought was lost forever. Hope. Children pointed upward, cheering. They came. The humans came. The warlord commanders shouted in anger. They had crushed countless worlds before. None had resisted. But these humans were different. Their ships did not scatter in fear. They moved together, striking with precision, fighting not for conquest but for something stronger. As the battle raged, the dreadnought Titan loomed at the center. Its massive cannons roared, sending shockwaves through space. Enemy cruisers shattered under its firepower. The warlords realized, too late, that this was not just another enemy. This was a storm that had come for them. Hours passed, the skies filled with wreckage, but the humans pressed forward step by step, ship by ship. They pushed the invaders back. Their voices echoed through the communication lines, fierce and unyielding. "Protect the planet. Hold the line. Humanity does not forget." When the first wave of warlord ships finally began to retreat, silence fell for a moment. The alien people below wept, hugging each other, looking at the sky now filled not with enemies, but with human defenders. They had been saved from the brink of destruction, and they realized that all of it was because of one choice long ago. Because they had saved a single human, humanity had come back for them. But Admiral Carter knew this was only the beginning. He looked at the maps at the warlord fleets regrouping in the distance. "They will not stop here," he said quietly, "and neither will we." The battle was far from over, but the message was already clear. Humanity had arrived, and humanity would fight. The battle above the alien world raged without pause. The first clash had shattered the enemy's confidence, but the warlords were not defeated yet. Their fleets regrouped, their commanders screaming orders, more war cruisers moving in from deep space. The sky became a furnace of light and fire. The horizon dived through the chaos, her engines burning bright. Captain Laura Green stood tall on her bridge, her voice calm but commanding. "Target their cruisers. Keep our flanks clear. Push forward." Her crew obeyed without hesitation. Gunfire thundered from the horizon's turrets, tearing holes through enemy shields. Missiles streaked across the void, striking true. Another enemy frigate split apart in flames, but the warlords fought with savage fury. Their ships were brutal machines of war, thick with armor and spitting streams of plasma. One enemy destroyer locked onto the horizon, unleashing a barrage that shook the ship. Sparks flew across the control panels. Alarms screamed. Smoke filled the bridge. Laura steadied herself, her knuckles white on the railing. "Damage control teams now. We hold the line." Meanwhile, Admiral John Carter commanded from the dreadnought Titan. His face was stone, his eyes sharp. "Form up with the Valiant and Liberty. Concentrate fire on their flagship." The Titan's colossal cannons roared, streaks of burning light cutting through the void. The Liberty added her volleys, and together they broke the shields of the enemy's lead ship. It exploded in a blinding flash, debris scattering like stars across the black sky. The carriers released wave after wave of starfighters. Their small frames darted through enemy formations, weaving past plasma bursts and missile trails. Among them was Daniel Price, his hands gripping the controls with steady determination. His fighter twisted and rolled, lasers cutting down 2 enemy interceptors in seconds. His wingmate shouted over comms, "They're regrouping. Watch your 6." Daniel spun hard, dodging enemy fire by a heartbeat. He clenched his jaw, whispering to himself, "Not today," and countered with a burst that shattered the pursuing craft. The alien civilians watched from the surface. The sky above their burning cities was lit by streaks of light, like 1,000 falling stars. Explosions echoed in the distance, shaking the ground. Yet every time they looked up, they saw human ships holding strong. They saw starfighters chasing the invaders away from the skies above their homes. For the first time since the warlords' arrival, their tears were not only of fear, but of hope. The warlords, enraged, tried to break the humans with brute force. They sent their heavy cruisers straight into the heart of the fleet, hoping to smash through sheer numbers. But the humans did not scatter. They held formation, shields overlapping, ships covering one another. The horizon slid between 2 battleships, intercepting fire meant for them. Laura's voice rang clear. "We fight together, or not at all." Her ship groaned under the assault, but the battleship survived to fire back. On the Titan, Admiral Carter received reports of damage. Entire decks were ablaze, casualties mounting. Still, his voice never wavered. "Reinforce the horizon, protect the carriers, press the attack, show them humanity's strength." His words carried through every channel, fueling tired crews, reminding them why they were here. One human boarding party stormed an enemy cruiser. Their dropship slammed into the hull, cutting through steel. Marines poured inside, fighting in narrow corridors filled with smoke and fire. Their rifles cracked, their boots thundered. "For Earth," they shouted, "for the fallen." They fought room by room, pushing the warlords back, until finally they reached the command bridge. The enemy commander roared in defiance, but the humans cut him down. The cruiser fell silent, now under human control. Daniel Price's squadron dove into another wave of enemy fighters, their formation tight, their hearts burning. He remembered the day he was pulled from death by these very aliens, and that memory drove him harder than anything else. His voice over comms was fierce. "We're not letting them take this world, not while I'm alive." His squadron followed him without question, scattering the enemy like dust. The battle lasted for hours. The void was filled with drifting wreckage, broken engines and trails of fire. Yet the human fleet pressed forward, their discipline unbroken, their spirit unyielding. Ship by ship, they pushed the warlords back. By the time the second enemy flagship was destroyed, the tide had begun to turn. The warlords, once so sure of their dominance, now tasted fear. They had faced countless worlds before, but never had they faced an enemy who fought not for land or treasure, but for honor. Humanity's strength came not from greed, but from loyalty. And loyalty was a force no weapon could break. On the alien world, survivors crawled from shelters, staring in awe at the streaks of fire in the heavens. Their hearts swelled with disbelief. They had saved one human years ago, never expecting anything in return. And now an entire fleet of humans fought and bled for them, repaying a debt that no one else would have honored. As the wreckage of another warlord ship burned across the horizon, Admiral Carter's voice echoed through the comms, steady and resolute. This battle is not yet won, but today we remind the galaxy humanity does not forget. And the fight raged on, fire and steel clashing in the black ocean of space. The humans would not stop until the skies were free. The tide of battle began to shift. The warlords, once arrogant and confident, now struggled to hold their ground. Human warships pressed harder with each passing hour, their guns blazing, their formations unbroken. It was as if the entire fleet moved with one heartbeat, one purpose. Admiral John Carter watched from the bridge of the Titan. His calm eyes studied the enemy formations breaking apart. "They are desperate," he said quietly. "Now is the time to push them." His voice carried through every channel. "All ships, advance, press the attack." The horizon, battered but unyielding, led the charge. Captain Laura Green stood tall, smoke curling around her bridge. Her crew's uniforms were stained with ash and sweat, but no one faltered. "Forward," she commanded. "Keep firing, keep moving." Her ship's cannons lit up the darkness, punching through another enemy destroyer. The warlords roared in defiance. They unleashed their reserves, wave after wave of ships. Their commanders screamed threats promising death and slavery to all. But the humans met them with cold steel and hotter fire. Starfighters danced through enemy formations, darting like arrows, ripping into engines and weak points. Among those fighters flew Daniel Price. His squadron was exhausted, fuel running low, but his determination only grew. "Stay tight, stay sharp," he told his wingmates. His fighter dived into a swarm of enemy interceptors, his cannons blazing. 2 enemy ships exploded under his fire. His voice shook with emotion as he muttered, "For them, for the people who once saved me." Meanwhile, aboard human dropships, boarding parties prepared for the next stage. The order was clear. Take the enemy flagships, break their command. Marines checked their weapons, tightening straps on their armor. Faces were grim, eyes sharp. They knew many would not return, but none hesitated. Dropships slammed against the armored hulls of warlord vessels. Charges blasted holes through the steel, and human Marines surged inside. Gunfire and explosions echoed through narrow corridors. The warlords fought savagely, their blades and weapons gleaming, but the humans pressed forward step by step, shouting with every advance, "For Earth, for the fallen, for the free, on." One flagship, the Marines breached the command bridge. Enemy officers drew weapons, roaring, but the humans stormed in with unrelenting force. Bullets tore through consoles, smoke filled the chamber, and finally, silence fell. The human commander raised the flag of the Federation inside the captured ship, a signal that carried across the battlefield. The enemy lines faltered. Their fleets, once proud and terrifying, now wavered without their commanders, without their flagships. Their coordination crumbled. Human ships pressed harder, surrounding and breaking them apart. Admiral Carter's voice was cold as steel. "Do not let them regroup. Finish this." Back on the horizon, alarms blared again. Another enemy cruiser had locked onto them. The bridge shook violently as plasma bolts ripped across their hull. Laura gritted her teeth. "Brace," she shouted. Her ship staggered under the impact, but still she refused to retreat. Return fire. Aim for their engines. The Horizon's guns lit up, pounding relentlessly until the cruiser's rear exploded, sending it spinning into the void. Daniel Price's squadron joined the final assault, diving into the chaos above the captured warlord flagship. His fighter was battered, its wings scorched, but he fought on, weaving through debris, dodging blasts by inches. One more, he growled, targeting a fleeing interceptor. He fired, and the enemy ship shattered. "We hold this sky," he declared, and his squadron echoed him. On the ground, the alien people watched in awe as human boarding actions were broadcast. Images of Marines storming warlord ships, faces determined, hearts unyielding. They whispered to one another, unable to believe, that all of this, these massive sacrifices were being made for them, for a kindness they had offered long ago to a single lost human. Tears fell freely, some weeping openly, others raising their hands to the sky in thanks. The warlords, now desperate, tried to retreat, but humanity gave them no escape. Carriers launched another wave of starfighters. Dreadnoughts unleashed their final barrages. The black of space was lit with explosions, each one marking the fall of another enemy ship. The Titan's guns roared like thunder, striking down any who dared flee. By the time the 7th hour of battle passed, the enemy fleets were broken, shattered, their surviving ships scattered, leaderless and afraid. Humanity had turned the tide with sheer resolve, with fire and steel, but more than that, with loyalty. They were not fighting for themselves, but for those who had once chosen compassion. As the smoke cleared, Admiral Carter stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze steady, his voice calm yet powerful. "This is not just victory," he said. "This is a promise kept. Let the galaxy remember. Humanity answers when kindness is shown." The alien people looked up, and for the first time since the invasion, the skies did not bring fear. They brought hope, salvation, and a new bond forged in the fire of battle. The final enemy vessel burned as it fell into the planet's ocean, sending waves crashing for miles. For a long moment, silence filled the skies. The roar of cannons, the fire of missiles, the screams over comms, all faded into quiet. Only drifting wreckage and trails of smoke remained above the alien world. Humanity had fought and humanity had won. On the bridge of the Titan, Admiral John Carter stood tall. His face was hard, but his eyes softened as he looked at the planet below. "Signal all ships," he said, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "The world is safe." Across the fleet, cheers erupted, tired voices shouting in relief. Men and women embraced one another, some crying, some laughing, all knowing they had done something greater than themselves. The Horizon floated battered, but proud. Its hull scarred, its shields drained, but it was still flying. Captain Laura Green sat back in her chair, her body aching, her voice rough. "We did it," she whispered. Her crew erupted in cheers around her, some clapping shoulders, others wiping tears. They had stared into fire and survived. Daniel Price landed his fighter back in the carrier bay. His ship was scarred, pieces missing, but still intact. He climbed down slowly, his legs trembling. The ground crew rushed to him, but he raised his hand, his voice quiet but steady. "We held the sky." For him, this was not just another mission. This was the moment he had waited for all his life. He had finally repaid the kindness shown to him years ago. On the surface, alien families crawled out of their shelters, cautiously at first. They looked to the sky, expecting to see enemy ships still circling. Instead, they saw human warships, hovering like guardians of steel and light. Mothers clutched their children, fathers raised their hands. Elders fell to their knees in gratitude. Some wept openly, whispering prayers, others shouted, "They came! The humans came!" In the great square of the capital city, the alien leaders gathered. Their robes were torn, their faces pale with exhaustion, but their eyes shone with hope. They looked up as massive human transports descended. Soldiers marched out, not with the stride of conquerors, but with the steadiness of protectors. Admiral Carter himself stepped forward, his boots echoing on the broken stones. He faced the Alien Council, his hand resting calmly at his side. One of the alien leaders stepped forward, her voice trembling. Why? Why would you come for us? Why risk so much for a world not your own? The question hung in the air, silence pressing on all sides. Carter looked at them, his voice deep and steady. Because you once saved one of ours. You showed mercy when you had nothing to gain. Today, humanity returned that gift. You saved a human, and so we came to save your world. The words rippled through the square. Aliens bowed their heads, tears streaming. Children clung to their parents, whispering the words over and over. The human soldiers stood firm, but many felt their own eyes burn with emotion. For this was not just victory, it was honor. Captain Laura Green walked beside Carter, her uniform torn, her body sore. She whispered, "Do you think they understand?" Carter nodded slowly. "They understand. They will never forget, just as we never did." Daniel Price stepped forward from the ranks, his helmet under his arm, his face scarred but proud. He bowed slightly to the alien leaders. "I was the one you saved years ago. You gave me my life. Today we gave your people theirs. This bond will never break." The aliens gasped, recognizing the human from their old records. Their eyes widened in awe. From that day forward, a new alliance was born, not one written on paper or signed in council halls, but one written in blood, sacrifice, and gratitude. Humanity had proven something that echoed across the galaxy. Mercy shown to one human would be repaid by the strength of all mankind. As the fleets prepared to leave, the alien people lit their cities with torches and lights, filling the night with color. It was their way of honoring the humans, sending beams of brightness into the sky as if to say, "You will never be forgotten." From orbit, human soldiers looked down at the glowing world and felt pride swell in their hearts. On the Titan, Admiral Carter stood once more at the command deck, his voice echoing through the fleet. "This is not the end. This is the beginning. Today we fulfilled a promise. Tomorrow the stars will remember. Humanity stands for more than war. We stand for loyalty, for honor, for the bonds we forge." His words carried to every ship, every soldier, and every heart that had fought that day. The galaxy would tell this story for generations. The tale of how one act of kindness saved a single human, and how in return, humanity had saved an entire world. The invaders had learned fear, but the innocent had learned hope. And in that hope, a new chapter of history began. The skies were quiet now, but the silence was no longer filled with despair. It was filled with peace, earned through fire and steel. Humanity had come as warriors, but left as guardians. A promise had been kept, and a friendship had been born.